Dr. Rayfield has 34 years of educational experience, and he's currently serving as an interim superintendent in Georgia.
Drum roll, please.
We used to Dr. Boyd counting down for us.
I know. Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Good afternoon, Dr. Rayfield. I'm
Good
Daniel
afternoon.
Boyd. I'm the interim superintendent. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
The hot seat.
Good afternoon. I am Kim Crockett. I'm serving as chair.
Okay,
Billy Holland, District 4.
Tracy Strichick, District 1.
okay.
Jamie Jackson, District 3.
Dr. Rayfield, I'm Kyle Glover, District 5.
Nice to meet all of you.
Nice to meet you, Dr. Ray.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Okay, we will each ask you a few questions, and I have the privilege of going first. So your first question is, please give us a brief summary of your professional experiences, your personal beliefs on public education, and why you are interested in being the next superintendent of Watauga County.
Okay. I am originally from Coosa County, Alabama, which is very close to here, and graduated from Auburn. Went to Georgia, began my educational career over there, and finished my master's degree after several years and of working over there, and moved to Oklahoma State after finishing my master's degree, finished my doctoral work there in agricultural education and educational administration and leadership. Finishing that job, Oklahoma State offered me a job, and so we stayed there for a couple of years. My wife is from Georgia. So our first daughter was born, and my wife was very kind in her comments, but she said, you're going to need to find a job a little closer to home where the grandkids can be close to their grandparents. So we moved back to Georgia, took a teaching position there, and then worked for the State Department for a number of years in career and technical and agricultural education. We have some regional offices there that I worked out of for several years and covered the southwest corner of the state. I became a CTAE director in Cook County, and a year after I became a CTAE director, the superintendent retired. And the district came and asked me if I would be interested in serving as a superintendent. And I told a couple of people that they had lost their mind, that I didn't know that I wanted to do that. But I did it for 7 years in Cook County. I thoroughly enjoyed every year of it. Then I moved to a bigger district, which was Decatur County Schools in the southwest corner of the state in Bainbridge, Georgia. I served as their superintendent for 6 years. And then we moved to North Georgia to the mountains in Union County and served as their superintendent. And so I retired in Union County, which gave me 15 years in the superintendency. So most of my professional career, at least half of it, has been spent as a county school superintendent. The other part in local education or with the State Department. And so when I retired, I was in my early 50s. And the reason for my retirement was to come over here and take care of my parents. I only have one sibling, and he is a professor at Texas Tech. So Georgia's a little closer than Lubbock. And so I took care of my parents. They both passed away within 18 months of my retirement. And so I found myself, after taking care of them, still in my early 50s and wanting to do the work, wanting to get back involved. So I went to work for Tift County Schools, which is about the size of this school district, and served as their CTA director for the past 4 years. not too very long ago, there was a superintendent in our region that was terminated. And the school district has been just in an absolute turmoil. And so I have been doing some daily work for them on a contract basis because they have no budget. They have, anyway, they are having a hard time. And so I'm serving on a daily basis with them as their interim superintendent right now until they can get their things squared away. The reason that I think if I look at this opportunity with Autauga County Schools, it is an opportunity, very honestly, for me to come back very close to home and work in Central Alabama. I still have a lot of friends, a lot of relationships, and feel very comfortable in this area. But more importantly, when you look at the school district is very diverse. It's very progressive. It does a tremendous amount for students on what I would call a very conservative budget. So I think you're doing an excellent job with the resources that you have to work with. And so it's very close to Montgomery. It's very, lots of opportunities that I think for growth, lots of opportunities for someone to come in with a vision for the students and the families to move it forward. I do have an agricultural background, and I think that allows me to blend with all sectors of the community. I've worked in very diverse situations. I've worked with lots of different people, and I've also got my rural background and have worked in systems of this size. So very comfortable with my ability and the opportunity to become the superintendent here.
Thank you. Okay, being a professional educator, you have experienced many highs and many lows. What is your greatest professional disappointment, and what did you learn from that?
Wow. I really think that I served as superintendent in 3 districts consecutively. And one of the problems that, and I'm quite sure it's was a national issue and continues to be, but one issue that we had in Georgia that was becoming something that we had to address was drug use amongst our students, and how we would try to address that proactively. And so many of the county school systems in Georgia created drug testing programs, and the only way that you can legally do it in the state of Georgia is to test every student randomly out of the population of all students that are involved in extracurriculars. Okay, so that takes athletes, FFA, band, just about every kid comes into the mix, and you randomly test a sample of students several different intervals during the year. Cook County, my first superintendency, we developed a plan, we developed a protocol, we had 100% board support. It was amazing. Second county I was in, Decatur County, went in, same plan, same everything. They told me they had a huge drug problem among their student athletes. And so I thought, boy, this is going to be tremendously easy. Board members looked at me and said, absolutely not. And I said, can you give me a legitimate reason? And they said, we're afraid of who we're going to catch. That was really a low moment for me, because I, and all of what I'm sharing with you is public record. So it's not a national security secret or anything, but it was a low moment for me because I felt like we were trying to proactively work on a very serious problem in our student population, and not only our student population, but in our community. And we got to the point to where we were afraid of who might test positive. So that was one of the lowest for me, because I felt like we'd done a lot of work and we didn't get there.
Okay, thank you. He's taking his notes.
Okay, I got the next two. What steps are important to take to ensure you aren't exposing the school district to special education liability?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one of the most important areas in public education. Not only are you dealing with a student population that needs your very best in terms of teachers, in terms of paraprofessionals or teachers' aides, you need very highly qualified folks that work with those populations. I think you have to be proactive rather than reactive. It is very important to me to always have the protocols, the procedures, the handbook, everything that goes along with managing special populations, gifted, those student groups. I think you have to, everyone wants to say, well, we need to follow IDEA, and that's absolutely true. We need to do everything that's in their IEP. We absolutely do. In my estimation and in my professional opinion, we need to do more than that. Those students deserve more than that. And so facilities, equipment, the settings that we place them in, I think need the utmost care and importance. I think that we make sure that we not only meet the mandates, so to speak, but that we provide an environment that is very conducive to learning. The other aspect that I've seen very, very successful, especially in the past 5 to 6 years, is, making certain that we create situations where those students can be included in the regular school day. It might be for one segment, it might be for 4, depending on where they are with their what we have to do in their IEP. So I think we think ahead as far as that population goes. When I work with principals on scheduling, and they say, well, what'll I schedule first? You schedule special ed first. You make sure they're taken care of first. And then we move on to everything else, because that's a population that deserves our best every day.
All right. Many parents are concerned about safety in school, but safety has many implications, such as the safety of the physical plant, protection of students from physical harm, security of school facilities, and social and emotional safety and well-being of students. How would you work to operate a safe environment for our students?
Operating at just a little disadvantage that I have not physically been on your campuses. But I think first and foremost, we make sure that all of our campuses are safe and secure from any external threats. I think it's important that the administrators and the teachers in the building are very familiar with those protocols, that drills are executed, that simulations are done, and more importantly, that our first responders are a part of that process and understand what our emergency plans are and how everything falls into place when an incident might occur. I found in a lot of places that I've worked that sometimes, the fire department, it had been maybe 15 years since they'd done a walkthrough of one of the schools, and that's concerning. because they are the first responders, the ones that are going to be there to help you. And so I think they've got to be actively involved in that process. You know, when we look at teachers and other personnel, they're certainly just as important from a safety standpoint. So we've got to make sure that they also understand what their responsibilities are in, say, a lockdown situation where they have to secure their classroom and could be responsible for 25 to 30 students when that incident occurs. I think it's important to communicate to the public what we are doing with safety and security. Also, if we are actively doing simulations and drills, if we have something that is a perceived threat, one thing that I think is, if you talk to anybody that's worked with me, transparency and communication are of the utmost importance. And so we communicate that safety information and what our processes are as much as we possibly can without compromising the plan. You know, law enforcement will tell you, you got to put some information out there, but some of that information's got to remain with you because that's how you keep your students and your staff safe. So in the setting that I'm in now, we also work with GEMA, which is our state safety and security organization, to make sure that our plans are certified through that state agency and that we keep those current on an annual review. But it's real important that you develop the partnerships that you need to make sure that those buildings are safe and secure. You know, SROs have been a very important part of what we do. I've been in school districts where we had SROs in every building. I've been in districts where we had SROs that had to rotate between the buildings. I would say as much of a presence as we can possibly have in each of our buildings is, to me, of the utmost importance in the world that we live in today. We don't ever want anything like that to happen in Autauga County schools. But we can't sit at our desk and say that it never will or that it doesn't have the potential to happen. And so preparedness, I think, is the key with safety. What goes along with safety, though, is a tremendous amount of money. And there are grants out there, there are programs out there. Law enforcement has ways of helping to supplement that, but the district has to allocate resources as well to make sure that your campuses are safe and have the equipment in place to secure, say, for example, exterior doors and things like that. My experience in the school business is keys have a way of getting duplicated and passed around. So you have to look at different alternatives to secure the exterior of the building.
I think part of that question was also the social and emotional safety and well-being of students.
You know, I don't want to separate those, but I think you have to because especially post-COVID and where we are right now, I think we have a lot of students that have, and families, that have social and emotional needs and need supports. And I think we have to put everything in place that we possibly can, from guidance counselors to interventionists to partnering with behavioral health and people like that to make sure that we're able to get the students or the families the services they need. The other part, I think, is educating the teachers and the administrators. You know, there are a lot of educator prep programs that you can go through that entire program and not ever encounter any type of coursework or formal training sometimes in social, emotional well-being of a student and how to detect when something's reportable or something is going wrong. And so we've got to spend some time training our folks on how to recognize what's going on and then help to determine what those interventions or supports can be to help those students be successful and overcome those issues.
Okay, I have two questions about data.
Yes.
So high performance by students and accountability are priorities for us. How would you assess the current student performance levels in our school system? And how would you assess the effectiveness of our teachers and programs? So children, teachers, and programs.
Gotcha. I've looked at a lot of your data, and I think my opening statement, or one of my opening statements, still holds true. I think you are doing a phenomenal job with the number of students that you have, the resources that you have, and 14 different locations, and community schools, and just a very diverse set of circumstances, if you will. When you look at the data, you have one of the same issues that's surfacing for everybody in the country. That's math. Math needs some work, but it needs work everywhere, okay? Alabama actually has stepped ahead of some people in, the legislation that led to reading proficiency at the 3rd grade level and math at the 5th grade level. I think personally and professionally, that's an awesome step. I think early learning is crucial. Again, the state of Alabama is moving into trying to create pre-K situations in a lot of systems throughout the state. Pre-K, I can tell you, will be a very, very positive step in addressing the early learning needs of the students where that's made available to them. Both of my daughters were fortunate enough to have pre-K, and I can tell you it was something that was extremely valuable in their academic development. I think if we're going to improve, we have to, again, understand, I really think you have to go back to some very basic premises, and that is helping our teachers to understand that all students have the ability to learn, that every student learns in a different way, and that as professionals, we have to be able to recognize that sometimes what we're delivering for the masses is not good for everybody in the classroom. And so we develop interventions, and we develop specialized programs to help them. I think extending the school day with things like 21st century programs and things like that, where remediation can take place, is going to help with moving the needle on mathematics and ELA. And science and social studies, all of a sudden, in some conversations I've had lately, seem to become unimportant. We got to make them, we certainly got to get them reading, we got them doing math, but we got to remember that we have science and social studies to go along with that. And so I think certainly STEM activities and things like that for science, things that they can get their hands on. I think research tells us that if we want to improve academic achievement over the years, the research tells us that there's really only one thing that does that tremendously effectively year in and year out, and that's a good teacher in front of the classroom. a good, effective teacher in front of the classroom. Yes, there are software programs. Yes, there are textbooks. Yes, there are all kind of supports out there, but that leads into the second part of the question. We have to make certain that we have effective teachers in the classroom, that we are doing our best to hire great folks, bring them in and develop them, and provide them with the resources and supports that they need. We have way too many people getting out of education after less than 5 years because somehow they don't feel supported in what they're doing. They don't feel like they've gotten enough attention from their administrator. There are any number of factors that are hurting us with teacher retention. So now I would have to look at your evaluation tool to really be able to tell you whether, philosophically I would tweak that or not. But you have to, whatever tool you have to use it with fidelity, and you have to use it consistently. In some places, that evaluation process is not as, doesn't have as much integrity in it as I think that it needs to. In Georgia, we changed our process so that we would have more integrity in it, and after 5 years, we still got the same results statewide. So we don't have any bad teachers in Georgia, according to the evaluations. We have to do it with fidelity and consistency. And I think if you come into a district like this, you got to work with the principals, you got to work with the central office staff, you got to work with the folks that are in the buildings every day to make sure that everybody's on the same page with teacher evaluation and effectiveness, and then follow through with that with professional learning, professional development, and plans for improvement if that needs to happen. Because I can tell you, my first outing, I probably wasn't very good. And probably somebody needed to put in my evaluation that I needed to do a little better job on the preparation end before the students got there. And so I think we all can, from leader effectiveness to teacher effectiveness, it has to be something that is deliberately, you have to be very deliberate, and you have to be very consistent in terms of making sure that that doesn't fall through the cracks with somebody saying, we didn't have time to do it this year. We didn't spend enough time in classrooms. It's easy to get consumed with discipline and the routine and everything that goes along, because running a school is busy business, and it will consume you, and all of a sudden in December you realize, oh my goodness, I haven't done any teacher evaluations. I haven't done any walkthroughs. And so that would be one of the things that I certainly would put a lot of emphasis on, because I go back to my foundation or my anchor statement. Without the good, effective teacher in the room with the right supports, we're not going to move the needle.
Okay, thank you. What is your experience and opinion regarding the student-centered educational model, and how would you use data to guide your recommendations regarding student success?
I think when I look at your school reports, your school summary reports from the State Department, first of all, I just want to say I really like the way that that's organized and that's laid out, because it does provide much more information, quite honestly, than I'm used to. So my hat's off to whoever designed that. It really puts a nice picture together. I think we look at that data not just on an annual basis. I think, we use our summaries or our year-end data to capture where we are as a school and where we are with subgroups and things like that. Then I think we go back in with the administrators. We go back in with the curriculum folks and the central office staff, and we sit down and we talk about where the flags are, where are the red flags, what do we need to address before school starts next year? How do we put that in place for our students so that we don't burn up the first 9 weeks looking at the data and all of a sudden it's Christmas before we put the changes in place. And then I think, I would use the term progress monitoring on a very regular basis. I've seen it 9 weeks, I've seen it 6 weeks. The interval really doesn't matter to me quite as much as making sure that we get it done on a very frequent basis in our buildings, and make sure that we don't lose a student due to the fact, or a group of students due to the fact that we didn't make maybe even a subtle adjustment that would increase achievement. The data sometimes can be so harsh that it does work on teacher morale. And so I think it has to be presented in such a way that we're supporting our teachers, we're helping them to make positive strides and positive gains. We want them to be successful, but we have to look at that data very honestly. It needs to be presented to you guys on a regular basis. The board needs to see that data. The public needs to see that data. My personality, like it or not, is that we look at our good and our bad and we look at it together, and then we formulate a strategy for moving forward and trying to conquer some of our challenges. Because there is not a school district in this country that doesn't have some piece of their data that they're not satisfied with. So I think it's real important that we take regular looks at that. Again, I think accuracy, fidelity, integrity, and honest looks at those numbers is what gets us to a place where we can formulate the right solutions. Shooting in the dark is a strategy that I don't accept very well. Now I'm going to dive into the student-centered
educational model.
Student-centered educational model. I certainly would hope that all models that we have are student-centered. So I may date myself here a little bit. But I would assume that you're referring to a classroom model where the teacher becomes more of a facilitator, and that the students, I guess there's different terminology in different places on that, but I am 100% in support of those type of models where it's project-based or it's student-centered. We allow the students to apply the concepts, to get in groups, to solve problems, to work with each other. One of the things that I had to learn at the university level is I used to have to go to lunch with potential employers of Oklahoma State University College of Agriculture graduates. And every one of them said to me, hey, please quit worrying about the technical stuff that you're trying to teach them. Would you please try to teach them how to work in groups, how to treat each other the right way, how to solve a problem, and how to come to work on time. So I think that those soft skills, if you will, that we're trying to find from an employability standpoint can also be reinforced in that type of model in the classroom, because we are encouraging them to work in a different way. We're also encouraging the teacher to flip the classroom or work in a different way as a facilitator and allowing those students to explore their abilities and apply those. And I think that's huge in terms of comprehension and in terms of applying what they learn later on down the road.
Thank you.
I have the next two questions. They're
Sure.
financial questions. What involvement have you had in budget development and ongoing fiscal management? And please give concrete examples when possible concerning such areas as community involvement in the budget process, multi-year fiscal planning, and budget development.
Okay,
It's a lot, sorry.
that's okay. That's all right.
sense.
Anytime you say financial, it's a lot, especially in the school business. I have had, not boastfully because that's just not my personality, but I have had a ton of experience with educational finance. And one of those reasons is working in a small system was my first superintendency, and there was a very small, limited staff, and you learned it very quickly, and you had your hands on just about every piece of that process. I have managed fairly large budgets and up to almost 900 employees. I have managed 2 high school constructions, 2 elementary school constructions, and a couple of large renovation projects. One of those high schools was $37 million, which is a drop in the bucket today compared to what the construction prices are now. But the principles, I think, are still the same in terms of how you manage those projects. Transparency and accountability, follow my philosophy all the way from student effectiveness, teacher effectiveness, and on into fiscal responsibility. We're dealing with taxpayer dollars. We're dealing with federal dollars, state dollars, and local dollars. They're all generated to provide a free public education to our students. And so I have absolutely never had any problem being accountable for those budgets and those expenditures. I've had no trouble being transparent about those. I think when you present the information, again, you put the information out for the public to see. I know we are in a pattern over where I'm working now where we have to have 2 public hearings before the final budget adoption. I think it's the same over here. I really hate the state had to require that. I think we probably should have been doing that all along, because we should put that information out there. Everything we do becomes public record for the most part. But I have also managed budgets through probably the toughest financial times in the state of Georgia. I had to take 900 people down to 700 people. Nobody got laid off. We did it through attrition and creative means, but there was there were a period of about 6 or 8 years in Georgia where we received severe cuts to public education. So I understand the good years and the bad years. I think fund equity or the fund balance is extremely important. It is important to maintain a reserve so that you are able to survive those times when either federal money decreases, state revenues decrease, or you could even have local situations where the collections decrease. I've had multiple what we call SPLOST referendums that I have worked with, and that's a 1 cent sales tax. If if we're comparing it to similarly to what you do in Alabama. We have to do those every 5 years in Georgia to keep those going in a county system or a city system. And so you have to develop a referendum, a list of projects, and a list of expenditures that the voters vote on. And once it is passed, then you collect it for 5 years. There's a cap on it, and then you complete your projects, and then you roll to the next one. But it's all dependent on a 5-year cycle and a vote of the public every 5 years. So that process has to be tremendously transparent and accountable because, let's say, for example, you publish a list of projects that says you're going to renovate these 3 elementary schools, and the voters unanimously approve that in your county. Rest assured that when you start collecting those dollars, you're going to renovate those 3 elementary schools in some form or fashion. So accountability, transparency, I've dealt with budgets up to $50, $60 million, up to 900 employees at one time, and some large construction projects.
Okay. You've kind of talked a little bit on this, but I'm gonna ask
Sure.
the question. If you were selected as superintendent of Watauga County Schools, what strategies would you use to increase revenue based on sales and ad valorem tax increases?
Okay? I'm sure that's a loaded question.
It is, I'm sorry. They gave me the hard one.
Yeah. You looked really innocent until you asked that question. As I said, when you start talking about addressing an increase in ad valorem taxes, I think you go back to making sure that the folks that are going to contribute to that understand what your priorities are. They understand what your needs are, and then communicate that before you get to the point that you're asking the citizenry to vote on it. My dad was a lifelong resident of Coosa County, which is probably still one of the poorest counties in the state of Alabama. But when I was superintendent, he would call me every Sunday morning. And first thing he'd say was, "Son, how are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing fine." Second question, he says, "You hadn't raised those folks' taxes yet, have you?" I said, "No, sir, I've not raised their taxes." So I understand the other side of that from a landowner's perspective. People that own a great deal of land and a great deal of property are going to pay more than somebody who rents an apartment. And so there has to be a palatability, if you will, with everybody, that this is a good thing. And I think the other strategy is, if you have to decide as a group with the board, it's very important that everybody on the board understands why we're doing what we're doing and can go out and support that process and that decision. And is it 15 meals, or is it 5 meals, 5 meals, 5 meals? All of those are decisions that have to be made. Do you take it all at one time, or do you work yourself up gradually to that? Or does one group get taxed at this rate and the others get taxed? Lots of questions, I think, and lots of information gathered, and then convey to everybody that's going to have to participate, these are our needs. This is what we're going to use it for. And I promise you that that will be monitored with fidelity, and you will be, you know, when they start to see the projects develop and the things evolve from those funds, the oh, my tax bill went up goes to, well, that's really nice. We wouldn't have that if we hadn't have done that tax increase. Or we wouldn't be able to do that for our students if we hadn't done that. And that's what I've experienced. I've experienced farmers wanting to absolutely cut my head off to, man, this is a nice baseball stadium. How did we get this? Well, you remember when you threatened to kill me in the board meeting for raising taxes? That's one of the things that we got to do. So I actually went. A board member told me that there was a lady that was absolutely going to buy newspaper ads, radio, television, do whatever she could to stop building a high school in Cook County. And I went to her house with the board member. We sat down at her kitchen table. We had coffee. Told her what we were going to do. She said, you know what? I was wrong. She said, I just didn't have enough information. And I said, that's my fault. That's my fault. And she said, I'm good. She said, now I'm still not gonna like my tax bill when they bring it, but I'm not gonna fight you because we need a high school. So,
Did it pass?
yes, it's all about education. I mean, I think it's just all about being transparent and open and honest with people about what you're gonna do, and then using the right strategy to gather the amount that you want to try to assess.
Thank you.
Yep.
Dr. Rayfield, I have the next two.
Okay,
And we're through with finance. We're gonna get a little more personal.
thank you.
Okay. What are the top 3 strengths or attributes that you believe that you bring to us as superintendent?
I am a true servant leader. I'm not the perfect servant leader. I think Jesus was the only example of that. But I try to be very cognizant of the fact that I get the ability and the opportunity to serve kids, families, communities, and I take that service extremely seriously. So I'm a true servant leader, number one. I don't really chase plaques on the wall or pictures or anything like that. I just want good things, be able to facilitate good things to happen. And when I finish a superintendency or a stint somewhere, I want people just to be able to say this is a better place because he was our superintendent. Secondly, I'm a very good consensus and team builder. A lawyer told me one time when we were working on a mediation that I would make a good mediator. I really try to find ways to bring two sides together, whether it's on a school discipline issue or on a tax issue. I always think that there's common ground. And I always know that there's no way that anybody can do this work in isolation. No way. You've got to have good, positive, strong teams throughout your system to be able to make progress and to make positive things happen for kids and families. And when you look at 14 campuses, I mean, you've got to have a strong network of teams. And if we talk about consistency on things like academic achievement and teacher evaluation and trying to achieve consistency in all those areas, you have to have folks that you can trust and that you've built those relationships with. Because I do believe relationships are at the core of what we do. Kids are not going to learn and take anything in until they trust us. Taxpayers are not going to buy in until they trust us. The board is not going to buy into a superintendent that they don't trust, and vice versa. And trust and respect are earned. They're not given. They're earned. And so, again, if you're in the superintendent business, you go into a new district, you can say that the people in Bainbridge trusted Fred Rayfield. But Fred's got to earn the trust in Autauga County and Prattville and Billingsley and Marbury and throughout the county. So I think consensus building, trust, and teamwork are number two. And then third, I've been blessed with being married to a wonderful wife for 30 years. She's a retired school secretary, front desk secretary. So I do take good care of secretaries wherever I go. She makes certain of that. I would do that anyway because they are your lifeline, and if you don't figure that out pretty quick, you're done for. Both my girls are grown, food scientist in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and youngest was working on her PhD in pecan horticulture at Georgia. And so we're ready to come give it back to Central Alabama. And so the third thing is I have a true desire to come back and work where I grew up and work with people that I'm very familiar with the culture. I'm very familiar with the demographics. And I do have a desire, a really genuine desire to work here and become a part of the community.
Good. Okay, you've mentioned all of our communities. This system is comprised of 4 separate and very different communities. There's a lot of pride that comes from each of those communities. A lot of great accomplishment from each one of them.
Yep.
How do you unite those 4 different communities? And you mentioned this a little bit while ago, but how do you unite that under the common goal, under the common set of standards that we all desire here?
Yeah. I think Ms. Crockett asked me what one of my lows was. One of my highs was we developed a model called Community Conversations in the Decatur County School District. And it was mainly because less than 12 months before I got there, they had closed a community school down in the southern part of the county. And a few years before that, they had closed another community school, which I had nothing to do with, by the way. But what we had then at that point was 3 outlying communities outside of Bainbridge that were really having a hard time with embracing what was going on with the school system because their community school had no longer existed. And so we had a very structured effort to have community conversations at least 2 or 3 times a year where we went in and we just had, some were open forums, some of them were structured groups, It was any number of things that we did, from parent engagement to talking about the next tax referendum. But we made sure that we didn't make the people that lived in Attapulgis drive to Bainbridge to get their information. Okay? And we also conveyed to them that they were part of a bigger picture. And we were all in that business together. And we needed them to complete the puzzle. I think your community schools are huge. I graduated from one of those at Wilgufka. We played Billingsley, we played Marbury. We competed against them. And what a wonderful way to grow up, and a wonderful model to go to school in, by the way. And I know it can be an expensive model sometimes. I know it can be one where people feel like they're left out. And so I think you have to be intentional with bringing those groups together. And it's not going to happen in 3 weeks. It is not. And you have to take it slow and incrementally and help them understand that Autauga County Schools is this big umbrella that all of us come up under. And we're all served by that same mechanism. And we're all going to benefit, you know, and if we can take some of the resources that are in some places and distribute things out, and, you know, I'm really big on equity. And equity comes in a lot of different ways. But I'm very committed to the fact that if I'm the chief operating officer in a county school system that has those community schools and has different pieces, every child and every family gets the same, or my best shot at the same commitment and the same resources every day. Once they see that in action, they begin to trust the bigger mechanism. And I'll tell you, it was about probably almost 3 years before the people in Attapulgis decided it was a good thing to be part of Decatur County Schools. And they still hated the long bus ride, by the way. But we made things better for them. They had much better facilities. They had much better teachers. I mean, it just, once we dedicated the resources and the time to mending and creating the relationships, they're very open to the mission of the district. I think they got to be included in every bit of that process, though.
Dr. Rayfield, thank you so much.
You are welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, that concludes all of the questions that we have. We have just a second to spare if any other board member has a question that you would like to ask.
Mine's really quick.
Sure.
It's a yes or no.
Not financial, is it?
It's not financial.
Well, it could be.
I mean, it could be, maybe. So I know you're from Coosa County.
Yep.
And you're willing to move back
Yep.
to Alabama. Would you be willing to live in Autauga County if you were to receive this position?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we own very small amount of property still in Coosa County, but no, my wife and I would live here.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Okay. Anybody else? Are we good? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Dr.
for the
Rayfield.
opportunity.
I appreciate it very much.